Hello and welcome to AWS Made Easy Ask Us Anything live stream episode number 54. We are your hosts, Stephen Barr and Rahul Subramaniam.
Hey everyone.
And we're here to talk about all things AWS and to give you tips and tricks that can help you save on your cloud spend, to have better deployments. We've just returned from two great summits. How are you doing, everyone?
Doing very well.
There we go.
Wow. We just went all dark. Yeah, doing very, very well. A little jet lagged. We were in London in the first week of June, and then we were in Toronto in the second week. I've lost track of timelines here. And then we're going to be at FinOpsX next week in San Diego. But it's been so amazing to be at these summits. I think the audience, the crowd has been absolutely spectacular. We've been kind of overwhelmed by the response that we've got at these events. I think particularly it has become even more apparent. I mean, it obviously was before, but I think right on top of everyone's mind is how to be as cost efficient as possible.
Yeah, and I think that added to how busy our booths was, right? People were definitely interested in the subject matter. That was really, really, really fun to have that reception.
That's right. And people are just trying to learn more as quickly as possible. Again, I think it's very clear that the footprint of AWS services overwhelms most folks who are either in it already or trying to get moving in the cloud. And everyone is looking for help. Everyone is looking for the simplest answers to make quick progress, get some savings under the belt, and get as efficient as possible. So it's become an imperative across every organization. The other thing that I found quite interesting, and particularly in the Toronto summit, was the excitement and the enthusiasm in all the students and new folks wanting to understand the cloud and join in. And it was a bit surprising, kind of doing this for a while. It never, it always feels reinvigorating when you meet someone and you have to explain what the cloud is and the advantages of cloud, every single time. My perspective, I found, has improved or has changed over a period of time about how I explain it, how I encourage people to, do things earlier. In the early days of the cloud, it was cutting edge, bleeding edge computing. And so you had a different perspective about it. Today, it's like an imperative. So you kind of have it, you pitch it in a different way, you talk about it in a different way. And it's in everyone's interest to have an accelerated path to getting to the cloud.
Well, I spoke to one lady in Toronto, and she's from let's say, a Canadian government-run agency. I would say which, but they have, like you said, they have a cloud-first initiative, and
Right.
by the late 2020s or maybe 2030, they have to be, past a certain threshold, like 95% of their computation has to happen in the cloud. And
Correct.
they've got hundreds of data centers on-prem and existing hardware, and they're seeing the writing on the wall of, okay, we need to sunset these. We can't be managing 400 different installations and different configurations. That's a lot of variation. So they're seeing that, and also they're seeing that AWS is doing the work on the other hand to, a lot of focus, especially in Toronto, was on governance, right? Two of the speakers
Correct.
were from the Royal Bank of Canada. They're really focusing on data and data governance in these highly regulated industries. So it's not the Wild West anymore. We are getting all the boxes ticked for HIPAA and for SOC 2 and for any other standard that you'd need to meet. And I guess also the appearance of other data centers, right? Because many countries still have the requirement to keep their data onshore. And so who knows, maybe there's going to be a region in every country.
I think a combination of outposts and it's really hard to be in every country out there and build massive scale data centers everywhere. But I think the idea of having outposts and the idea of having those city centric data centers is an incredibly well thought out idea where you can still meet the data governance and the data sovereignty issues for a bunch of customers who absolutely require, while the vast majority of other potential customers in that region can still use the other services that are available in the nearest region to their geography.
It's interesting how you think about the promise of the internet as being the geography doesn't matter, but you're still you really think about these issues when you want to think about the user experience, about latency, about relevance of recommendations. People, that's still a very big part of the actual internet and how that actually works. Actually, I had
Yeah,
one
I
of my.
think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that used to be a larger concern maybe a decade ago, but today when you really um, look at the kind of services that we use and the way we interact with things, sometimes you wonder whether we stress too much on latency. Um, to give you a simple, I was having a conversation the other day with a colleague, and we were talking about how for some of the answers that you ask ChatGPT today, you have to wait 30 or 40 seconds. um, and that seems okay. I think it's a function of how complex a task you're trying to do, and how much is a reasonable time to wait for a good answer. I think the quality matters now more than the latency of responses in a large number of cases. And I think some of that is kind of starting to play out a lot more. Like, there's another extreme scenario where we were talking to a customer, and for a solution, the fact that we had extraordinarily low latency in a service being delivered, they were like, okay, this should basically cost nothing because it costs nothing in compute. Your latencies are so insanely low. And they missed the point that an insane amount of engineering went into reducing those latencies. So it kind of has, there's a certain point of diminishing returns and reducing latency in user perception and the value being delivered. And I think we are starting to get to that point. So back to the conversation about where data centers are being placed, I would still say there is a phenomenal amount of spread that's already in place. And for 95 to 98% of the use cases, you're probably pretty good with the nearest data center to you today. There's enough geographical spread of those. There's a very, very small niche of customers who require even lower latencies than that. It's probably gaming, which seems like a
And
potential
high
candidate for
frequency
low.
trading, I suppose. But
Yeah,
how
but
many people are
yeah,
actually doing that?
exactly. And by the way, there is a stock exchange in New York, EDX, I think, where they actually had to put in fiber cables where they introduced latency to kind of make sure that there's an entire AWS case study on that, where because there were people who had unfair advantages by bringing servers closer and closer to the exchange, they literally have a box, and I'll try and bring up the YouTube video that's worth looking at. They actually have a box of fiber where they have hundreds of kilometers of fiber sitting in a box that literally introduces latency so that the everyone who is a customer of that particular exchange has an equal opportunity to trade and to trade fairly.
Well, as it reminded me of another article I saw called Wall Street's Speed War.
Yeah.
This one says 3 milliseconds is 3/1000ths of a second. Does that really matter? That's close to an eternity in automated trading. And this is referencing a custom-made fiber cable that was built along a better route than the existing fiber to shave off those 3 milliseconds.
Yeah.
That's I guess an arbitrage opportunity if you're in that world. But like you said, it leads to this clustering behavior where everyone wants to be as close to the action as possible, and your cable lengths and those things start to matter, and it can start to be unfair, right?
Yeah.
We want to win via algorithm, not via um, proximity.
Correct.
Well, speaking of, it was funny. I was thinking about 30 seconds as a time to wait, and part of me was thinking I could watch a whole YouTube short. I could get a whole recipe. I could learn something in 30 seconds. This is an eternity.
That's true.
That's how we've been conditioned with our dopamine responses, right? 30 seconds is this eternity in the world of seeking a dopamine hit as well. Well, I wanted to
Very true.
share some of the excitement from AWS Toronto and also plug our LinkedIn page. We're really working hard to bring a lot of really fun, just taste of the action onto our LinkedIn. Here, I'll show you one of these great videos that was put together, and let's see if StreamYard's going to share sound.
I think we need to boost up the audio
Let's
levels.
see if we can. Well, there you can see all the fun we were having there, and all of the demo booths, the swag. People were busy all the time. There's you giving your talk. It was the after party. The after party was so much fun. So
Oh yeah.
they we had brought in a there we go, just finished. They had a really neat band that was singing these classic songs. It was in a speakeasy. They had someone who was painting the Toronto skyline. Do you know where that art ended up? Was that a prize or something?
Yeah, I think we should have it somewhere. We should check with the team as to where that landed up. But it was phenomenal. It was actually really awesome. The after party was absolutely great. I think we had the party start at 6:30. There were folks lining up from 5:30, and if I'm not mistaken, we had something like 250 people lined up outside when doors opened. So phenomenal response. Everyone had an amazing time, and yeah, it was just so much fun interacting with everyone in Toronto.
A huge there it is. Busy day. We're having a lovely after party here at the Black Pearl. Let's see if we can get there's a shot of the crowd there, and that's the actual, the music that was playing. Really fun jazz, and it was great. There's
Yeah, those are a
some
bunch
of the
of
students.
students.
There's the painting.
There it is.
Great turnout. So if we didn't get to talk to you today, then please just reach out and schedule a demo. And otherwise, we will see you at the next one. Bye. Yeah, that was a lot of fun, and a huge thank you to the team who put that together behind the scenes. There's so many little details that go into this. I remember before the Toronto summit, I heard one of our team members was talking to one of the facilities people, and they were talking about how there was a sign that was placed on the outside of the door, but we wanted to leave the door open so that our colleague Bill could give demos. But then when the door was open, you couldn't see the logo, so we had to get a different sign put on there. And this is like one of 10,000 little details that had to be executed perfectly so that there was a good flow of people and a flow of information so that we could see this. And then one
kudos
last
to the
thing.
events team. And by the way, if you missed out on London or Toronto, we still have San Diego coming up next week, and we are going to be in New York with similar events. It's going to be an incredible amount of fun. So come and join us at any one of these two events. FinOpsX next week in San Diego, and New York at the AWS Summit at the
Absolutely.
end of July.
These are both going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, please join us for those. We have, let's see, before we get started into some of our I guess to wrap up the summits, we talked about follow our LinkedIn page for updates. We've got lots of people at all stages in the cloud, but that's okay, right? It's totally okay. We had one person who came to our FinOps roundtable in London who said, I just got assigned to the cloud team in my office. So I'm just trying to learn definitions and terminology. And that was the exact right place for her to be, because we had the chance to talk through all of those things and say, okay, there's a lot to sort through. Here's how to, here's where to start. Because there's a lot of stuff is there for historical context, but if you didn't know the context, it'd be a lot of reading and before you got there. So that's really good to, if you don't know, then even more reason to show up.
Absolutely. So yeah, look forward to seeing some of you in one of those two locations that are coming up.
Now, we have an exciting guest next week, and speaking of FinOpsX, so we are going to be in the air, but we pre-recorded an awesome interview with Jeff Barr, Chief Evangelist of AWS, and my dad. It's a great chance to talk to him, and we used Studio version 2.2. So the major versions of the studio are changes to lights and camera, and then the minor versions are equipment, gear, lighting, placement. So that's my semantic versioning for the studio. So this is 2.2. It was really fun. We got the new Blackmagic Studio cameras. Most importantly, we were able to sit around, have a great conversation, and have it recorded.
Yeah, I think for me the biggest game changer was the in-person um, conversation. That was just so much fun to have. I think we could have gone on for hours the way things were going. And thanks to Jeff for being so incredibly generous with his time and coming and talking to us. We had some amazing conversations around cloud cost optimization, especially in AWS. We had conversations around tech evangelism. We had conversations about uh, the future of AWS in AI and the AI race that's going on. So, all amazing stuff coming up. Please stay tuned. We're going to air it next Tuesday at this time. I'm sure it'll be fun to watch. I can't wait to look at the cut of it. There's just so much that we talked about.
Yeah, that's coming up really soon. All right, well, let's take a quick 30-second break, and then when we come back, we're going to be talking about the EC2 M7A and Code Guru. All right, we will be right back.
Great.
Is your AWS bill going up? CloudFix makes AWS cost savings easy and helps you with your cloud hygiene. Think of CloudFix as the Norton Utilities for AWS. AWS recommends hundreds of new fixes each year to help you run more efficiently and save money. But it's difficult to track all these recommendations and tedious to implement them. Stay on top of AWS recommended savings opportunities and continuously save 25% off your AWS bill. Visit cloudfix.com for a free savings assessment.
All right, we are back. And the first announcement of today is the EC2 M7A instances in preview. Wow, we're on AVX3.
Yeah.
And VNNI and bfloat 16. So what is the M7A?
So the M7A is the latest generation of AMD processors that have been announced by AWS. These have amazing, frequencies, turbo frequencies up to 3.7 gigahertz, which is pretty amazing. I think the M6As were really awesome with the recent Nitro changes that happened with on AWS. The M6As and the C6As started becoming really go-to processors over Intel. And now with the M7As, it's just becoming even harder to to kind of beat AMD at this game. The price performance, though the price hasn't been announced, is said to be very promising, and the total cost of ownership for these instances is going to be even lower. So it just makes sense to start looking at migrating to the M7As as soon as they become GA, and we expect that that'll happen fairly soon in some of the regions, and then they'll roll out to other regions over a period of time. I think for me, the biggest change is not particularly just this particular instance. I was looking at some of the numbers from everything that we're doing at CloudFix. Over 40% of customers are still using instance types that are the fourth and fifth generation. And one of the things that I think folks don't realize is that the price performance improves so dramatically with every generation that when you have a backlog of 2 or 3 generations to jump through, you're actually leaving tons of money on the table, anywhere from 20 to 40% on the table. So it just makes sense to constantly be aware of the new instance types that are coming out and constantly upgrade yourself to the latest instance, because the performance of these instances is significantly greater, and invariably the cost of these also is lower than previous generations. They are on the latest version of Nitro, which improves performance everything from IO to networking to memory. In fact, these particular instances, the M7As, are on DDR5. So the memory access itself is going to be significantly faster and better. The error correction is going to be a lot better. So it just makes sense to be on the latest instance and then start right sizing to save costs even further. So I would say if there was a run book that I was, talking about, step one is get your instance type modernized to the latest generation. Step two is right size your instance to just what you need based on the latest instance type that you're on. And you will find that you can very easily save anywhere from 30 to 50% if you are 2 or 3 generations away from the latest generation.
No, that's interesting. It goes counter to the psychology of most people say, "Oh, I don't need the latest. I don't need the latest and greatest. I'm fine with the old thing. That's fine." And that's a very reasonable way of being, right? But the cloud is not often intuitive with that. The newer
Correct.
innovations, it's not just bigger and better. It's also just faster per dollar, or in energy perspective per watt.
Correct.
That's really a lot of the innovation is, and almost the price of the instances is in some ways a proxy for the price of energy in the long run. And so by having more and more efficiency with the newer instances, that's how you win.
Correct. And I think a lot of people who equate the cost of being on-prem versus being in the cloud forget this fact that over a period of time, things actually get cheaper. And because it is OpEx and not CapEx that you're spending all upfront and amortizing over 5 or 10 years where you're stuck with the same hardware for that period of time. Over here, what you basically get to do is you get to switch over to the latest generation, which is cheaper yet faster and be more efficient in the way you use infrastructure.
Because you're not amortizing the cost of that hardware purchase yourself. You're sharing that
Yes.
with a lot of other people who are also
Exactly.
kind of profitably using that hardware.
Exactly.
Speaking of latest generation AMD stuff, I don't know if you caught this this video yesterday. Our fastest server ever. This was
Yeah.
built. So this is, and I can appreciate this more now as a content creator.
I think we need to put that up on screen.
There we go.
Yeah.
So this is Linus Tech Tips, our fastest server ever. It was just launched 22 hours ago. Also powered by an AMD and huge arrays of SSDs. And as a content creator, I'm appreciating more and more the need for fast disk space and fast processing. Our recording that we did with Jeff, just that with the 3 camera angles and the raw audio generated about 100 gigabytes of content.
Yep.
That we have to sort through. And so then being able to, I had to order some more local storage yesterday, and luckily Amazon Prime got that to me same day because one of my external disks was failing, so I had to move everything over. But we are very lucky that we live in this age of great hardware. It's funny, people often talk about, have we plateaued in terms of hardware design? And the answer is a very big no. I think we're a little bit abstracted away from where the innovation's happening.
Yeah.
Because like you said, it's happening in the very high-end server space. It's happening kind of behind the scenes. And so things that are getting faster to us are happening because of the innovation behind the scenes. But a lot of that computation is being shifted to the cloud on the desktop space, unless you're like a hardcore gamer. Your MacBook is probably going to be fine for half a decade or more.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think what the cloud is really bringing to the game is the distributed nature of how you can now federate a lot of the computing, and that's been quite the game changer the way we actually look at performance. I mean, you just talked about local storage, but the reality is that having up to 1 TB of local storage is more than sufficient for almost any use case, as long as you have a great internet connection and you have services in the cloud like S3 and that just store all of your data infinitely. So with the amazing advancements in network speeds that we see in every household, like I remember 15 years ago when I started with AWS, getting a 2 Mbps connection in most parts of the world would have been really hard. And today, I can have 3 fiber lines in my place from 3 different providers, all one gigabit lines that give me more bandwidth than I can ever consume at this point. And that advancement has made the need for local servers, local storage and stuff, pretty redundant. I mean, I have more than a terabyte of storage on my disk on my laptop, and I walk around with that all the time. So I think we've gotten to a point where local is good enough, and now all the expansion in compute and storage and all of that, you just rely on the cloud to do all of that for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think of my local storage as like a buffer of this is holding it until
Exactly.
it gets to S3.
It's like a local
And
cache.
yeah, exactly. It's and also like if I'm editing videos, I want to make sure I can edit. Obviously, want to edit videos locally, or I guess you can render remotely in After Effects, but
Yeah.
that's not enough for me. I don't need I don't need to do that. It's too much for me for the levels I'm doing.
Right.
Well, circling back to the article, the M7A, we get a link to the instance page. We get
A lot of the details are
competing
there.
features.
Yeah, I think for
DDR5.
right now, I would give this definitely simplifies. I would really urge the audience to take a look at upgrading or migrating to the latest instances or instance type. Sorry, not instances. Migrating to the latest instance type, because the benefits of doing that are huge. I know it takes a little bit of effort, but the price performance that you get out of it is totally worth it.
And you're not talking about maybe shifting over to, I mean, Graviton, that's a good idea. But we're just saying just go to the latest generation of whatever you're at
Correct.
to start with. And then you can look at something like Graviton or AMD if you're on Intel. But as a first step, we like incremental progress. First step, just go to
Correct.
the latest generation.
So I would put it as there are three different steps, even in that, that we use internally for our runbooks. Step one is go within the same instance family. Don't change anything else. Go from the older version of whatever yours. So say you were on a M4 or you're still on an M5, move up to the same Intel family, but move up to the M6 or the M7s. If so, that's step one. Just move up in the same family, but move from the older generation to the latest generation. The second step is a crossover that you could do with very minimal potential downsides, and that is to move from the Intel family to the AMD family, because they end up being 10 to 20% cheaper, depending on just the generation that you're on a crossover. Skip the fifth generation of AMD altogether, but if you're going from the fourth or fifth generation of Intel, or even the sixth generation of Intel, crossing over to the sixth or seventh generation of AMD, depending on what's available in your region, that's a big jump, and it can provide a bunch of cost savings without really very much without much downsides to that exercise. So that's something that you can definitely look at. And then a slightly more disruptive change, though, speaking to Arthur and from our own experience, it's really not a big problem, but just you have to do a lot more testing. And that's the move to Graviton, where you switch over from your x86 architecture to the ARM architecture. You just have to make sure that you've tested your environment well enough to just switch over. It's not shut your eyes and switch a button and everything works. So it's not hard. It's relatively straightforward. You just have to make sure that you've done enough testing before you turn that one on.
So you can look at the porting advisor. You can double check to see, for example, if you're using Python, are you pulling in any dependencies which are specific to your architecture? And
That's
often
right.
it's something simple like changing your user data script to make sure you're installing the right dependency. Because sometimes in
Correct.
Ubuntu, the ARM dependency has a different name than the Intel dependency. And so you want to update your user data script to make sure that that's configured properly. So there's three steps to review. Update within the same instance family, older to newer generation. So that's step one. Intel to AMD, step two. And step three, move to Graviton. So that's the most in order of complexity, but also more and more savings you can realize.
That's right.
Wow, that's a great summary of ways to improve your EC2 efficiency, and all of them should be fairly easy.
Correct.
The first two are going to be almost hands off, and the last one straightforward, not hands off, but won't be terrible.
Correct.
So, rating for this one.
I'd give this a 3, and yeah, I'd give this a 3 for right now because we still don't know pricing. It's a preview announcement. It's not a full-fledged, blog post, but uh, the fact that they brought it in definitely simplifies it. We will have to wait for more benchmarks, more stats that come out of it, and most importantly, the pricing. So we'll wait for those. They will come out in due course as they GA8. But from everything that I've seen so far, it's incredibly promising.
All right. Well, let's switch gears now to Code Guru. Code Guru Security is now available in preview.
Correct. So for those of you who haven't tried Code Guru is pretty neat in that it's a it's a tool that helps you with it uses machine learning to basically analyze all of your code and tells you about vulnerabilities that exist in your code and helps you patch them. There are other aspects of it where it can also do performance reviews. It can look at the way you've written your code and improve the and help you improve just performance, the way you write your loops, the way you've leveraged the services, the way you've passed your parameters. There are a bunch of things that can change that can actually make your code a lot more efficient in the way it runs. And Code Guru is pretty awesome in taking a lot of the best practices that AWS has developed internally and bringing that to you in a simple tool. So now this latest announcement basically introduces a bunch of security testing, again, using machine learning. And it's remarkable. Just by looking at your code, you can figure out whether certain ways in which you've written your code could cause security issues, and you can plug them right in where you're writing your code in your IDE.
And the really neat thing that I'm highlighting here, it's looking at it at a syntactic level. So it's not just saying regular expressions for port numbers or things like that. It's actually doing a more deeper analysis of what are you doing.
Yeah, I think
So
it's more semantic. So it really understands how you've written your code. It's not just syntactic. It's not just a compilation, you know, uh, error kind of thing, but it's more semantic in the sense that it understands the dependencies between multiple calls that you're making in your code and how they actually translate to the performance and security vulnerabilities that exist. So that's, I think, the real breakthrough where it understands the broader context of where and how you're using your code. And that's pretty neat.
So if you had something like that, I think I'm missing a parenthesis there. But if you had something like that where you are running
Dependency injection.
Yeah, exactly. Or having a SQL injection here.
Yeah,
injection
SQL
here,
injection, not dependency.
where
Sorry.
you're inserting something directly from here without any kind of string sanitization. Hopefully, it would pick up something like that. Actually, it would be a fun challenge to see what you could sneak past it. But this is interesting. So that's good. Log injection, hard coded credentials. That's a good one, right? So you should,
Correct.
if you're seeing any password fields, and this is so tempting to do when you're in a hurry. Like, okay, do I really want to set up secrets manager and get the IAM role and do all that stuff? No, I'll just copy paste. I'll deal with that later. Don't do that. Resource leaks. This is great. So because catching this stuff early is always better.
Correct.
And it's funny. I guess that's one of the things that comes with experience. You always feel this urgency to get something out the door as soon as possible, but take the extra half hour to do it the right way, and it will save you a lot of time because the internet will eventually catch your mistakes for you.
It only takes seconds these days for the internet to catch your mistakes. So the more stuff that you can do, the shift left principle, where the more stuff that you do at the time of coding, the better chance you stand of not seeing those explode while you've deployed your applications.
Which is what you don't want that to happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my original web administration job I had as a teenager, running the old versions of the LAMP stack, and you had to patch MySQL right away or your website would get defaced. Like
Correct.
if something came out, you had to be on it.
100% true.
So, how should we rate this one? I mean, this is a neat feature.
Yeah, I love it. I love Code Guru. I think it's a pretty neat tool. I'd give it a simplifies, and this is a 4 out of 5.
Awesome. Well, good work for the Code Guru team. and looking forward to trying this out. Looking forward to. I want to test it a little bit, see if I can get anything past there. It's always interesting. I don't know if for you programmers out there look at the obfuscated code contest because it's doing a semantic analysis, right? So I want to see how many layers deep that goes. So, Code Guru, go and check that out. All right, let's take another quick break, and then when we come back, we've got one more article, and then we'll be doing a deep dive. All right, we'll see you in a bit.
Is your AWS bill going up? CloudFix makes AWS cost savings easy and helps you with your cloud hygiene. Think of CloudFix as the Norton Utilities for AWS. AWS recommends hundreds of new fixes each year to help you run more efficiently and save money, but it's difficult to track all these recommendations and tedious to implement them. Stay on top of AWS recommended savings opportunities and continuously save 25% off your AWS bill. Visit cloudfix.com for a free savings assessment.
All right. Well, before we jump into that, we had a viewer submitted question that I wanted to put on screen. Rahul, if you don't mind, we can chat about that for a minute.
Sounds good.
So we had a question from Lori. Now, is it possible to pull something from, the typo here, an AWS API that represents the full setup of an account? I found AWS Config API is this able to report things like public S3 buckets or security groups with all the ports open. I guess we're thinking about security, about vulnerabilities. It kind of triggered my memory to this question.
Yeah. So here's my answer. You basically, AWS Config is the right service to actually pull information about what resources are deployed and how they are configured. So that's a good one to do. But if you're specifically looking for security related insights, I would say turn on Security Hub and configure that to make sure that it's scanning all of your resources for all the best practices that are in place. So Security Hub is your best bet to look at it from a security lens. Just remember this, that AWS has such a vast footprint of services and data that the mental model you should have is that depending on what you're trying to do, you have different lenses into the AWS world. If you are purely focused on billing and cost related data, then CUR is your cost and usage report is really your lens that you should use to look at all of that data and across all of your services. If you're just looking to organize all the stuff and make sure tagging and policies and all of that stuff is set up the right way, then your AWS organizations and all the associated services are basically the lens that you would use to define and manage all of your organizational units and how the accounts are managed under it and so on. If you're looking at security and vulnerabilities and all of that, then Security Hub is the lens that you would use across all of that data. So depending on what you're really trying to do, I would say the answer is going to vary. There are different lenses in the AWS world that you would use to actually get all of those insights. And then if you just want reporting and visibility across your organization, I would say use the standard Kudos dashboards and a bunch of other tools like that are available to just share that information across different parts of your organization, share it with different people and stakeholders. So boils down to what you're trying to do.
So Security Hub, Kudos dashboard. I have a little bit to add to this that's kind of inspired by the CloudFix Finder Fixer paradigm. So in general, the account region isolation is kind of fighting this give me the entire view, right? Those two principles kind of run opposite each other. The accounts and regions are by design isolated, and the things that kind of unify that are organizations. And so in addition to, like you said, the Kudos dashboard, we're going one level back. What's unifying that is the cost and usage report. So I guess my 3-step process for looking at the totality of an AWS account would be, number one, use the CUR to get an account region ARN combo. So if you do say you're looking for all Neptune instances, I was thinking about that yesterday. If you're looking for all Neptune instances running across an organization, that's your first thing. Do a query that gives you account region ARN combos. And then you'll need some function to get the credentials for a certain account and region, because each of those may have a different IAM credential. And then once you have those, you can use the service level APIs. So in general, for iterating over everything in a particular AWS account, the way to start is to use the cost and usage report. And that's where you get a list of account, region, ARN. And then you can start from there to drill down into where you can then use the service level APIs in a good old fashioned for loop to get everything that you need.
Yeah, I would just add, just being very certain about that. That's a great pattern when you're specifically focused on cost, right? And you're looking at utilization. You're looking at metrics like that. That pattern works very well. But it's not clear from the original question whether that's what you're looking at or you're just looking for an inventory. You may not need to go down to the service level API. Just remember that these are multiple loops and iterations, and you really don't want to, go down that path if you absolutely don't need to. So first answer the question, what is it that you're really trying to do? Find the right tool which acts as your lens into that kind of data. And there are multiple, right? So if you have a very specific question about what you're trying to do, we can help you on the show to figure out what the correct services to use for that particular data. So for example, if you're just trying to figure out S3 buckets where everything is open and you want to just shut it all down and make sure that your exposure to the internet is going to be limited, use Security Hub. That's more than enough to get you all the information that you need. It'll tell you which S3 buckets are exposed, which ones don't have the right access control set up, and least privilege model set up. You can go fix it with Security Hub.
Awesome. Okay, so Security Hub is for all the security focused things. And then my answer is more like in the very, very general case of looking for assets of a particular type, but probably you want to use the higher level tools.
So let me repeat this again. Cur for cost and usage.
Yeah.
That's your lens. Then if you just want an inventory of resources, you can use AWS config, where it'll describe the resources to you in a certain level of detail. It's not as much as the describe API for every resource, but it gives you a bunch of the higher level data at least. It'll at least give you enough to get started. Then if you're specifically looking for security and vulnerabilities, Security Hub is your best bet. And then there's one more I had covered, and I've lost my chain of thought. But anyway, those are my top 3 picks, I would say.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Laurie, for the question. We hope this helped, and hope you continue watching. And let us know how it went.
Great.
All right. Well, let's go to article number 3, which is, speaking of security, here we got another one. This is connecting to EC2 instances. And this one's really cool. I like this a lot. It's interesting. On the one hand, functionally, it's not a big deal, but ergonomically, it's a huge deal in terms of dealing with the, you could already do this if you had all the machinery in place, but now it connects all the dots for you.
Correct.
So EC2 Instance Connect endpoint. So you could SSH into EC2 instances without public IP addresses. With EIC endpoints, customers can have remote connectivity to their instances in private subnets, eliminating the need to use public IPv4 addresses for connectivity.
Correct. So a vast majority of customers, over the last 15 years, the concept of having a jump box that allows you to, get somewhere to get to an instance inside a private thing was the way to do things. And unfortunately, a lot of folks would find that process fairly painful because you needed a network administrator to make sure that the jump box was set up with the right permissions, with the right users, so that you could jump in and connect into other machines from that instance. Fairly painful. So the shortcut that used to be taken by a large number of teams was to ensure that there was a public IP attached to the instance, because then it made it really simple to literally just connect via the public IP. But that just opened up these instances to so many different vulnerabilities. You really never, ever want to do something like that. So this actually makes it really simple, because now you don't have to do anything at all, and you have direct access to those instances without needing to go through the exercise of a jump box.
Yeah, that makes things a lot easier. And even I was thinking about our Elastic IP finder fixer, where we find orphaned
Yes.
Elastic IP addresses. This is how you get orphaned IP addresses, because you grab a public IP address for a one-off purpose, and then it sits there and racks up charges.
Correct.
I saw this post actually on Jeff's LinkedIn, and he referenced Dennis's LinkedIn. You can now SSH into your EC2 instances using the AWS CLI, and this just makes
Yeah.
it a lot easier, right? Anything where you don't have to start managing. I like this AWS EC2 Instance Connect, and then you give it an instance ID.
Correct.
That
It's just really simple now, really trivial. I would recommend this become the default for everyone. One of the nice things over here is that it makes um, a lot of the other tasks like setting up agents and stuff a lot easier, because now you're not running around trying to get access to these instances, especially around the networking around it. As long as you have the key, you can connect directly to it and get started. So I think this goes a long way in making sure that instances are all uniformly accessible and makes life way simpler for developers.
it's interesting looking through the comments that some people are saying, well, why do you even need to SSH into instances anymore? Is that kind of an anti-pattern? If you find yourself having to SSH, and I was thinking, I see their point. Like, maybe you shouldn't need to SSH, but at the same time, I'm not quite ready to buy a car with the hood welded shut. Even if I shouldn't ever need to open it up, I'd like knowing that I can.
Yeah, so I think it boils down to how you package up your applications. For a lot of applications, even today, SSHing or having access to SSH is really important for debugging and getting status updates. A simple scenario, like, you may not be directly running an application on the EC2 instance, but you might be running Docker, right? When you're running Docker, even though you might have containerized applications, sometimes the Docker kernel might be throwing errors or something might be going wrong. And how do you get to identify what's going on inside? Sometimes you just need to run something as simple as ps-a to understand what processes are running on that particular machine. I've run into those situations so often. Or if you're running your Kubernetes controller over there, and you are not able to access something remotely, then you actually SSH into the instance and figure out what's going wrong. Why is a particular port that was supposed to be available for remote access or for remote querying not working anymore? The process might have died. Something might have gone wrong. So I think it's naive to say that you don't need SSH anymore. It is a good practice that if you have to access it very rarely, but I think practically speaking, and not wearing a purist hat, I would say just being pragmatic about it, SSH is still a very, very important mechanism of understanding what's going on an instance.
Yeah, I completely agree, right? You don't want to make it, because if you make it impossible, then you get the worst situations where people are then doing a DIY solution, like installing
Yes.
some other remote access protocol on top of it. So for all practical intents and purposes, although I'd love to never need to SSH into an instance, I'm sure at some point I'm going to mess something up. I'm going to have to debug in the production environment, and I'd like to be able to do that. So
Correct.
Great for ergonomics, great for not having to manage keys anymore. How should we rate this one? Let's put this back on the screen.
I think I would give this. So the announcement itself, I was actually going to give it a 3.5. I love this post from Dennis. I think this post from Dennis was really, really neat.
I'll put that right there.
That was really simple. But I wish this post and all of this was actually in the blog post.
Well, and let's see. So there's the announcement. Oh, well, look, we get the compute blog, which has the large blog post.
Yes.
So that's pretty neat how it's showing you how that all works. You get the architecture diagrams. So I suppose between the LinkedIn
getting
post,
started is already in here. So yeah, I'm going to change that. I'm going to make it a 4.
There we go.
And 100% simplifies.
Absolutely.
Like, without a doubt, I think it'll prevent a lot of folks from hopefully now setting up jump boxes, and that's one instance less that you have to manage, and two, not launching new Elastic IPs where not necessary.
And not winding up with idle infrastructure that you have to get rid of later.
Exactly.
Well, speaking of idle resources, it is time for our deep dive. And I realized I did not make a transition this week, so I have to imagine the snorkeler. What should we do? Let's jump into the deep dive. So
Yeah,
let's
let's
get this
jump right in.
set up. Here we go. And then remove that from stream. There we are. Okay. Let's do the deep dive. And today's deep dive topic is removing idle QuickSight users. I'm going to put a link to the blog post. 1 second. QuickSight idle. I'll put a link to that in our CloudFix blog. It's in the comments now. And so the idea is, a lot of the times when we talk to people about QuickSight, one of the issues is spiraling costs, and we're going to see why in a moment. So let's jump right into it here. So what is QuickSight? QuickSight is the dashboarding. I'm going to shift my camera angle here. So QuickSight is AWS's native managed dashboard, BI intelligence. It's growing in features all the time. Like, it's not quite Tableau yet, but it's growing in features. It's really exciting where it's going. And with QuickSight Q, you have a natural language querying about business data. So you can say what month in the past 2 years had the highest sales. So growing in features, it's really neat and great because it's AWS native. So it integrates with AWS data sources. You don't need to go to a third-party vendor and do an integration and a whole other purchasing process. It's just right there in AWS. And really cool things like the Kudos dashboards, other cloud intelligent dashboards are being built on top of QuickSight, and you can embed them in your own products. So it's pretty neat. It's really good to know about QuickSight. And there's really cool things happening in the QuickSight world. So just put up some of the latest QuickSight announcements.
Yep.
There's the user level cost and usage data, the APIs to accelerate asset deployment, geospatial heat maps for points on maps. So before, when it first launched, it was pretty simple, right? Bar graph, pie graph, line graph. And now they're adding geospatial, common sub-expression elimination for spice performance optimization. So that's neat. So if you query the same table twice in exactly the same way, and it can optimize that out. Scatter plots for more use cases. So there's great things, great innovation happening in the QuickSight platform. So here's the pricing. There's two classes of users. There's two classes, and then with Q or without Q. So you have authors and readers, and they're both charged at a recurring monthly rate. But then the readers, there's a session charge. So the idea is you hand someone a dashboard to go look at that will open up a session. And Rahul, how have you seen these session charges? It's pretty easy to burn through them somewhat quickly, isn't it?
Yeah, so it depends on how you use the dashboard. So let's say you're using the dashboard in a standalone mode. Okay, a session is basically once you're logged in, then the session is about 30 minutes where you are interacting with the dashboard and everything is fine. However, when you're embedding these dashboards inside another application, then every context switch from one page or one tab to another, not when the whole tab is embedded in as part of one dashboard, but when you're switching across dashboards, that each link or each click will be counted as a separate session. So that adds up pretty quickly, and therefore it makes sense to have readers. The good thing, however, is that you get charged only for how much ever you use. And so you should get charged up to a max cap of $5 per reader, and on a per month basis. And you only get charged for the users who actually log in and use the dashboard during that period. So again, you're only paying for what you use. It's not being charged just because you have a user in the system, and you just get charged by the number of sessions that they are running.
Yeah. So if you just want someone to see a dashboard and you're worried that, they might only look at it once and then never log in again, that's fine, right? That's 30 cents. You get the value out of that, but then you don't have to worry about some cost. It's on the author side where it's quite a bit per month. The cheapest would be a $9 or $12 charge on the standard plan. Many of the customers are going to be on the enterprise plan, where they're on 24 month to month or 18 annually.
Yeah, you have to remember that the authors, you shouldn't give author access to everybody. The authors are the ones who are basically massaging the data. They're defining all the data sets. They are writing all the Athena queries and bring them into QuickSight. They're actually defining what the dashboard should look like, defining what data sets they map to, the layouts, all of that stuff. You don't want to give everyone access to that. You're probably going to have just a handful of author users, but the vast majority of your users should be reader. Now, if that is not the case, then that's one of the first anti-patterns that you probably want to address.
Yeah, should have most reader. Well, you never want more people writing than reading. That wouldn't make sense. But how do we get idle users, right? Sometimes you're just assigned, all right, go make a new dashboard. You become an author, you do a project. Maybe it turns out you're not really into dashboarding. You just have to do it as a one-off. Or maybe you think, okay, I want to try out QuickSight, but then you get involved in other projects and you stop using it. Well, you end up with that recurring $24 a month or $18 annual with that recurring fee. So that's how you end up with these idle users. People, everyone wants to give it a try. They email their administrator, they get a login, and they try it out. And for any new thing, there's some people who are going to stick with it, some people aren't. Great. So yeah, it's really easy to create a new user, and there's no real mechanism for saying, hey, this user hasn't logged in a long time. And so what we are doing is talking about literally creating that mechanism for detecting and then deactivating users who haven't logged in a long time. And to do that, we're going to have to tie together data from various data sources in order to do that. So I did a little pricing simulation to figure out how much money is on the table here. And so I thought, say if you start with 50 users, so you're evaluated QuickSight, 50 people sign up to be a reader, and then of those, 30% in a given month are going to stop using it and then not start again. Then we have 5 new users coming in per month. And then we're looking at month to month on enterprise. So I just kind of did a simulation to understand what would happen under this scenario. And this is what it looks like. So move over here. You see that initially your price is rising, but then, so say if you start doing a sweep at 1 month, well, then here we go. You've got a certain percentage of the users have gone inactive, and so your monthly costs kind of stabilize. And the more, so these different tiers here are saying how long do you wait until you start doing a cleanup? So say if you waited 6 months before you started looking at idle users, well, then you end up, your costs do stabilize, but it takes a lot longer for that idleness to be detected. So the more often you check for idle users, the less your steady state cost is going to be like. So on this axis here, we're looking at how many months how many months is it since you started, and this is your monthly cost. And so we're seeing that the more often you eliminate idle users, the quicker you get to a steady state and the lower your steady state cost is going to be. And so it's kind of neat to think, okay, you could actually, in this 50 user scenario, you can save, it would cost about $14,000 a year, and you can eliminate about half of that, but a bit more than half, by simply, under these conditions of there's new users coming in and new users going out. It kind of reminded me of my stochastic processes classes back in grad school, right? You have a certain number coming in, you have a certain attrition rate. Do you get to steady state? And so this is what it's showing is you definitely want to do this more often, because you get to a lower steady state and you get there faster.
Correct.
So let's remove the idle QuickSight users. And so let's do it the easy way, is with CloudFix. Everything that we're going to talk about here has already been automated and tested and wrapped up. It's done. So you could use CloudFix, and you can just get a change manager document that will say, here's the idle users, click this button, you approve it, and they are removed. And this is one of those really easy ones because it takes a second to create a new user. So there's not a lot of loss if someone wants to get back into QuickSight after not using it for a month or two. But in the meantime, you automatically save that monthly fee. I mean, imagine if you bought a Netflix subscription for every single one of your employees. You at least make sure they were using it. It's that level of spend. So you'd want to keep track of that. Right. So here's the process for what we do to gather the right data to then remove idle QuickSight users. You want to use the list users API from QuickSight, and that will tell you all the users in the QuickSight domain. But then you can actually tell from QuickSight when they've last logged in. So in order to do that, you need to use CloudTrail, look up events, and find the login event. So you want to figure out when's the last time they logged in. And while you're there, you also want to find an active admin user, and that'll become important. Once you find users who are in this one, the list users, but you haven't found a login in a certain amount of time, you can consider them idle. And you can define idle to be, say, 30 days or 60 days. So once you've found users who are in the list of users, but they haven't logged in, you can, number one, you can transfer their assets to an active admin user. So that way you don't have these kind of orphaned assets. So there's an asset transfer API call, and that's documented in the blog post. And then once you have done that, you can delete the user by principal ID. That is a QuickSight API. So that's just, you give it the user ID ARN, and you can delete that user. And adding new users is easy. Now, the QuickSight has its own user list, or you can associate a QuickSight user with an IAM. But in any case, it's just one quick register user command, and you can get a user right back. So don't hesitate to remove QuickSight users. It's really easy to get them back. And even if you're on a savings plan where you've purchased a fixed number of QuickSight users per year, you'd still want to do this because that way you reduce the pressure on the amount of seats you've used up. Because if you've used up 100% of your seats and you don't know which of those users have logged in recently and which of them haven't, it's easier at that moment to say, okay, we'll just buy more seats, when that's not what you want to do. I'm sure everyone's done that, right? Even in my StreamYard, I'm out of storage space, I need to optimize, but we're going live in 5 minutes, I'll just go to the next storage tier.
Right.
So you don't want to do that. You instead want to have a process always going in the background so that you are the users that you're paying for are the users that you are actually using. So final thoughts of this, you can write this automation, you can run it monthly, and the more frequently you run it, the lower your steady state cost is going to be. But then people who use it, say, once a month legitimately, maybe you want to add an exception for them. I think once a month is about the right. Well, it's billed monthly, so you don't have a great reason to run it more than that. You can integrate it with SES to send a deactivation email if you want to. And if you're on a savings plan where you have prepaid fixed number of seats, you can still use the automation just to reduce the pressure on the number of seats that you have. So that way you know what your true usage is. And then again, CloudFix has automated this all. So that's one more reason to use CloudFix, the automated finder fixer. Remove idle QuickSight users, and you just don't have to worry about it, and it could save a substantial amount. This is one of the real cost drivers of QuickSight. Is everyone wants to sign up when they first hear about it. It's cool, it's new, but then we're all humans. Sometimes things stick, sometimes things don't, and so you want to be able to remove it for the ones that aren't using it. Well, that is our QuickSight. Rahul, do you have anything else on that one?
No, I think this is an easy one to just check. And you can use CloudFix to just do a free scan, figure out where all you can save money, and then you can decide what you want to fix.
Absolutely.
It's really simple.
Yeah, always reach out to me, Rahul, or anyone on the CloudFix team, and we can get you set up with a free scan so you can see not just QuickSight, but all of our finders, what's there, and then you can, like you said, decide which ones you want to fix and how you want to go about it.
Correct.
All right. Well, thank you, Rahul. It's been a really fun show. What's on the list for the week?
This week, we have a few meetings with AWS here in Seattle. Oh, by the way, I'm in Seattle. And we are hopefully going to record a few more in-person sessions with folks from AWS, and really looking forward to that later this week. And otherwise, enjoying the weather, though it's raining right now.
Yeah, it's a little bit cold today. We've got Darko later in the week. We've got Maria Petkova. The Jeff Barr episode is on the virtual cutting room floor as we speak, meeting my Adobe Premiere. And then, yep, that's it. So it's all in the works. That'll be going next week. Check out the CloudFix LinkedIn or YouTube page to get the event for that. We'll have that out shortly. Yep, please join us, and then we'll see you next week. FinOps X in San Diego. If you are there, please reach out, and if you're not, check out our page. We'll be doing a lot of updates, throughout the day as we can. So you can bring you the highlights, so you can just feel like you're there, even if you're not.
Exactly. Hope to see you all soon. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Is your AWS public cloud bill growing? While most solutions focus on visibility, CloudFix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by finding and implementing AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe. There's zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. We've helped organizations save millions of dollars across tens of thousands of AWS instances. Interested in seeing how much money you can save? Visit cloudfix.com to schedule a free assessment and see your yearly